Hi, I'm Shweta. I work as Associate Director in Data Analytics at Standard Chartered Bank.
Hi, I'm Perpetua. I am a psychologist and coach for overachievers around the world, and I'm also a published author with Simon & Schuster.
Great. Thank you, ladies, for joining us today for our conversation about ADHD and why get diagnosed. Okay, so the first question is, what made you guys suspect that you might have ADHD in the first place? What were the first signs that you noticed and so on?
So, for me, it was a lot of careless mistakes that I was doing. And, just to understand something, it took me very long than usual. Like, I would, during my undergrads, I would spend like 17 hours studying just for one topic and I'd still not be able to complete it. That was during undergrad, and I thought, it's normal. There's something wrong with me. It was not the ADHD part of what is wrong with me, but it was, something is wrong with me. But the break point was when I was actually interviewing for getting permanent in the current role that I'm actually in. I kind of did not have any confidence, and that was the work I used to do day in, day out. And even after putting in so much effort, I actually did not do well. And I cried the whole day, and I was like, there is has to be something wrong with me. I need to go to a doctor, a psychologist for a proper assessment. And as it turned out, I had ADHD.
Right. Thanks for sharing. How about you?
So for me, I spent my whole life being told, cool it, your speed is too fast. People who didn't know me would say, are you nervous? But actually, you're not nervous at all. So what is going on with you? And I had to explain that my brain is moving so fast, my mouth cannot catch up. If I look back in terms of my biography, there are many things that didn't make a lot of sense. Like, I couldn't finish some tasks, I would get lost, I would leave money at the ATM. That's painful as a kid, right? We call it the ADHD debt because you end up losing money for no reason. And then at the same time, I was like, what on earth am I? Why is it that some things I can just focus on like crazy, and there are some things that, bam, my brain just switches off. Right. So I had to understand, like what Shweta was talking about, because am I this strange special snowflake? There has to be other people like me. So that was kind of my journey into trying to understand just how on earth my brain is wired and what I can do about it. I was training to be a clinical psychologist then, and when you're abroad and you are learning about yourself and wanting to walk your talk, and helping people discover who they are, you kind of want to do that for yourself as well. So that kind of coincided with the point where I was realizing that, I actually am an introvert. And so as I started to understand more about my personality and how I'm wired, the ADHD bit came in as well.
I see. So how did you guys react when you realized that you had ADHD indeed?
So my husband has ADHD as well. Back then he was my fiance, so he was like, I think you should get diagnosed. So that's how I went to the doctor and his psychiatrist actually, who eventually became my psychiatrist now. So I was like, okay, now that explains whatever has been happening. Like, no matter how much effort I put in, I'm still an average student. Like, I was always an average student by the paper. And I tend to just get lost. If the conversation is more than 10 minutes, I'm like, okay, I'm in my own zone then.
Right. How about you?
For me, it was a big epiphany moment. There was a lot of forgiveness for myself, and then also what next? What next if I can never be the person who can read a boring book or sit in a sermon and not fall asleep?
Right.
It's sort of like getting a diagnosis. Like, at least for me, it was sort of a closure, and like, as you said, it's more forgiving. Yeah. Like, you just try to be not so hard on yourself. That you don't say to yourself that you're dumb. Yeah. You're just saying that I'm just wired differently.
Kind of wonder if I knew about this when I was younger, even though people say you're a bit hyperactive, because I was from the era where people didn't really get diagnosed with that. We were just told we're naughty kids.
Exactly.
And so, if I had help for that, what would happen? But if I got medicated for that, what would have happened? So you start thinking about many different things, and you also realize that this future where you may never be that person you are told you have to be will never happen. So, there's a lot of emotional processing behind that.
And, did you guys also experience any stigma that came with the diagnosis? And if so, how did you kind of navigate that?
it was quite a bit of stigma from some people. So you'll be like, okay, so you are like that. And so you still got to work hard and become something else. So I'm like, okay, so you're telling me to get an alien to possess myself. I mean, I didn't have that self-assuredness at a point, but then later on I could find that words for that. So, but generally the responses or the reactions would oscillate between, are you sure about that? And that makes so much sense.
Right, okay.
So you kind of learn not to take things too personally. Again, that takes time to build that sense of resilience. And also learn how to respond to people, but that also happens with many things in your life, like not just about the way you're wired. So you can't please everybody essentially. So that's kind of adulting.
Yes, yes.
So when I actually told my boss, I think he took some time to understand that I have ADHD, but he knew because I've been working with him for 3 years, and then he was like, that kind of explains why you do 95% and the 5% that you just can't see it. Like, yeah, that explains. But there are a lot of people, as I told earlier, I was talking to you, I told my parents, and there's still a bit of stigma, anything related to your brain, that he was like, no, there is nothing called ADHD. Even though when I explained the symptoms to my father, he was like, I got that too. The basic stigma that I've really faced is that people look at me and say, you don't look like you have ADHD. I'm like, yeah, I'm not jumping around because I don't have hyperactivity. My hyperactivity is mostly impulse driven, which is buying something, or just trying to reach to end of a story. Like if I'm reading a book, I can't just retain myself in that suspense. I just want to reach the end.
Nowadays there's this trend, with TikTok and social media, that people go and watch videos and they start to self-diagnose and they think, it must be this, I must have ADHD. What is your take on that?
Nobody really is an expert unless you're really well trained in a topic, or unless you know yourself that well after many years of reflection and extensive scientific-based reading, because science and opinion are very different. So keep an open mind. Go in if you really need that diagnosis to help you understand, have some closure, or you need that piece of paper that will help someone, like for instance, give you some concessions in your life. For instance, if you're a student and you need extra time for your exams, or you need to show it to your boss. So in that sense, or you might find out it's something else completely. And that's all right, because the most important thing is that your brain has a story that it can tell itself, and that gives us a sense of closure.
So I just went to a psychologist to, just confirm that if I have test anxiety, but turned out that it was nowhere close to anxiety. I was just, he just narrowed it down for me to dyslexia, ADHD, or just my habit. I did not found that I did not have a diagnosis that I diagnosed myself with. I actually went ahead, just to be diagnosed, if at all I have a problem, or just clinically get it clear if at all I have an issue. And if I don't have an issue, I was completely fine with that. So it's really important to have an open mind and not double down on yourself just to think that I have to have it. It's not something that you have to have.
Yes, yes. So we've talked a bit about how you reacted, when you realized that you had ADHD. How about people around you, like family and friends whom you told? How did they react?
Like my parents, they were pretty oblivious to the fact that there is ADHD. So was I. When I told to my father that I am having these issues and these are the symptoms, and I just asked him, did you ever have it? He was like, yeah, I used to have it too. I was like, yeah, then you also have an ADHD, but then it's no time for him to, because he doesn't want to get diagnosed. So it's a different story. My brother, he is also kind of on that side as well. Like he's also having same symptoms that I have for the ADHD. He's like completely hyperactive. He used to break things around. He's like still doesn't want to go for a diagnosis, which I think it's okay. It's his choice. Friends can't digest the fact that I have ADHD because I don't look like one. So with my peers in my office, Although my boss was pretty supportive, because when he found out that I have ADHD, he was like, that explains what you're doing.
So for me, when I realized I had ADHD, I had to think about my family background, and then I think about how my brother, we've always known he has ADHD, but again, we never bothered diagnosing him because from that era, 6 years younger than me, but still, you know, so we just found ways around it, and so that was no surprise in that sense. And then when we matched it to my father's speed and impatience, tick, 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 tick. Everything makes sense. There's a strong genetic component.
Yes.
So, you know, like on that topic, I started thinking going into my solution mode and, you know, the creative mode of the ADHD brain, right? So it's not to wallow into that whole, I'm like that, and therefore I'm in a little box, and I just hammered in the nail of my coffin. So I started looking for role models of ADHD. So who do we know? Richard Branson, for instance. And I'm like, okay, Richard Branson has a great life, you know, he's amazing. Then of course, you know, along the years, people like Elon Musk, you look back in history, Leonardo da Vinci. So I'm going to be okay.
Yes.
And then of course, you know, friends will not believe me. Some of them are like, I've known you for so many years, I cannot believe it. And I say that because by the time you knew me, I already learned how to mask. And being female, we are great at masking.
Yeah.
And also in a professional sense, I learned how to speak slower because I was doing a lot of media stuff, and I listened to some of the podcasts. I was like, okay, no one's brain is going to be able to really pick that up so quickly. Kind of like, I apologize if I speak too quickly today. So you kind of learn to put that dampener on your speed as compared to what I do in private in videos when I crank the speed all the way up. And so I explained to my friends, this is because you haven't seen that side of me, because I don't need to turn on that side of me when I'm with you. It's not that I'm hiding anything, but I have to function in a way that helps me play better with others.
So that's the masking you're talking about, right? So how open are you guys in terms of telling people that you have ADHD?
Super open.
Right.
Yeah, super open, not as, you know, like this is my excuse and therefore I'm entitled to be this sort of person, but rather, hey, you know, here's something you need to understand me. If sometimes you see my eyes a bit glazed and I'm not quite here, just bring me back. If you see me doodling as I'm making notes, it's not because I think you were really, really boring. If you are, I'll tell you. But rather, this is something that helps my brain to concentrate, so I actually focus better on you. So when I am able to tell it out to people, it's easier, but of course some people will make things difficult. And you know, sometimes we meet people who say things like, oh, but you know, I'm not like that at all. And yeah, no, total raw eye moment. So this is when I think, you know, because we spend our whole lives trying to mask ourselves, thinking something wrong is wrong with us, we get to be a bit of people pleasers. We tend to say yes to everything. So this is when the boundaries come in. So boundaries are the hell no's in your life. So when people get a bit, you know, funny, I will call them out. I'll say that, hey, you know, you've got this habit, or you know, you got mortally scared of cockroaches. You can't drink coffee. I don't call you on that and tease you on that. So in the same way, this is my brain. So if you want me to extend that courtesy to you that I've automatically done, you better do that to me.
Right.
Yeah, for me, I'm pretty open, and because the people I've been around, they don't know, at least the adult female ADHD, because of the stereotypes around ADHD. So I try to just talk about what I have gone through, and you know how the diagnosis went, and what I'm trying to do right now. So for me, like I just can't stick to a timeline, which is like pretty normal for an ADHD people. So I try to have like checks in between. So somebody like has to have a sword around my neck so that I can complete.
Yeah, and I think that's great because you're raising awareness. You're also teaching people and telling them about ADHD and how it works, you know. Tell us about your pillars of support. Like, who are the people that have helped you through and really supported you in your personal life, work life, and so on? Yeah.
So accidentally, I found a tribe of people with ADHD, a lot of them undiagnosed. But when privately, we speak so quickly together, our brains jump from here to there, we are curious, we are just insatiable people. And we found out about who we are and each other accidentally, not because we have ADHD, but through entrepreneurship circles or retrospectively as friends, we would sit down like, I think that's me. And some of them, some of them will also get diagnosed, but not a lot. So it's a whole mixed bag, because for us, it's like, how much utility does that also add to our lives? And so when we are able to just sit down and talk about this, or just, because I have ADHD, I don't get hunger cues, so I forget to eat. And then they're like, that's why. So it's like, we don't spend our whole time just talking about, ADHD, and, here's a support group, and, here's us mourning together, but rather, just little tidbits, and, if this is you, maybe, this is what we have to take care of, how we take care of each other.
Yes. For me, at work, as I said, my boss had been, because he left the company just now. So I'm just trying to explain it to more people so that they understand what I'm doing, to the newer boss and all that. At home, my husband has been a greatest support for me, because he himself has ADHD, so he understands it way better than anybody else. And my sister-in-law, who's actually a big exec at Facebook, like at Meta, and she suspects that she has ADHD, and since she suspects that she has ADHD, she understands me well, and she's like, you should try to just move things around like that, because she also forgets things. Like she's like, okay, I try to do it, but then I kind of sit on it.
Yeah.
So these people have been a greater support. Parents, I would say, not so much, because they're still, in a denial mode, that there is something called ADHD.
Yeah. So I guess it's really about finding your tribe, like you say, finding people who get you and who can support you through your journey. So looking back, is there any advice or any kind of support that has really helped you?
So looking back, if there's anything that could be different or more, it would be, believe me. Don't make me have to prove myself. So some people I meet along the way, when my life has changed, I'm a completely different person, and they will tell me about the stereotype. They will tell me about how, if ADHD, you'll be struggling, you'll be going to special education, and you will not have the success that you had today. And sometimes I get irritated, to say the least. I would actually have to say things like, so you want me to make myself the more devolved person of myself in order to get a little smattering of sympathy from you? That's a bit ridiculous. Sometimes you just got to call that out, because it's like people want you to handicap yourself to be believed, and I just find that very ridiculous. You're too successful, you're too pretty, you're too educated.
You should be struggling, like, it's like, we're not here for your empathy, sympathy, not empathy, we're sympathy, we're not here for the sympathy. It would have been a different story if I knew back then when I was in 10th standard, like when I was doing my O-levels. So it's like, if at all I knew that my brain was wired differently, rather than just people telling me that you're not doing enough, there has to be something missing. Like just listening to the fact again and again that you're not doing well, you're lacking in something, that just hurts your self-confidence. And I'm still to the point I'm struggling just to get myself up from that, like to have enough confidence in myself to believe in me that I can do this. I've come a long way in last 2 years since I was diagnosed, and I think if I would have been diagnosed earlier, or I would have gotten some kind of support at that point in time, I would not be so hard on myself and would not have had hampered my self-confidence that much. Although I'm just trying to recover from that.
All right, tell us about your passions. What were your passions when you were a kid growing up?
I actually, passion-wise, there were multiple. I like to draw. Like it was one of my passion to just sit in front of TV, watch Tom and Jerry whole day, not study. But jokes apart, and I used to not just watch cartoons. I used to watch a lot of Discovery channels, and knowing about history was one of my biggest passion, and still it is. Like whenever I travel, I just try to understand the history of the place where before I go, and just try to find the places where there is some historical importance rather than just going to clubs. And there was another thing, I used to watch a lot of detectives related show, because that's where the curiosity of my mind would just just concentrate on, like yeah, what is going to happen next, that kind of a thing.
So I think like if there was one word, it would be curious. Like you. So I'll just devour knowledge. So my mom would buy me all this Enid Blyton famous 5 books, and basically just Enid Blyton. Read it non-stop. I'll keep asking her for a new book. I remember in primary 1, my teacher told my mom that I would finish reading the entire class library in the shortest period of time ever. Then I had this encyclopedia set, which I still keep in my parents' house. It's called A Child's First Library of Learning, about every single subject in the world. And even the boring stuff about engineering, I would just devour it. I loved it. So, problem-solving stuff, yeah, detective kind of books, for sure, and eating. Oh, I love to eat so much. So it's like, the hyperactive bit of me just cannot stop eating at times. Still a problem, I easily best a man double my size, right? So, and it's not that, it's just the curiosity about food, and my brain will start to match like the pattern and the taste profile, and I'll recreate it. So, it's just whole journey of having, just enjoying myself, which I totally trace back to my childhood.
Okay, so fast forward to today. What does your current job entail?
I am a data analyst, and I find it really interesting, getting into data analytics. And I was a trained mechanical engineer. That also I found interesting because, you are building stuff, and I was literally, into something which was actually getting done there. So I was building the power plants, my vessels that you see, all those. So it was pretty interesting, because it was not just small things or just coding, You can actually see the real thing happening, and, the sense of responsibility that actually came with it. It's not just a normal responsibility, it's the responsibility of people's life working there, because if you make a little bit of mistake, it's all gone. And I think the sense of responsibility that it gave me, it's something that I can still work on it. And data analytics is something, as I said, my mind curiosity. You give me junk, I'll just make some sense out of it. As long as I find it interesting enough for me to work. Being a data analyst, I kind of love it.
Yes.
And I would not want to leave data analytics, to be honest.
Yes.
So I'm a psychologist and coach for overachieving leaders all around the world, and this requires me to solve some problems. So solving problems for individuals or companies would be things like, like your brain is just too chaotic, you're thinking too much. What got you here is not going to get you there to the next level. People with panic attacks cannot take trains and planes anymore. How do we get you back there in 8 weeks or less? And then people in abusive relationships, wanting to leave a psychopath or a narcissist, and they have millions of pounds or euros of assets to divide across different continents. So, and then the work I do is very different. So first I could be speaking across 7 time zones a day, which I love. Like one moment I'll be talking to, say, elite military in the US. The next moment I'm talking to a CEO or someone in education. And then next thing I'm talking to somebody who is like a VP in a sports firm. So it keeps me on my toes, and I love that. So my brain is always switched on. So not only am I solving problems, I'm also creating new structures for people and helping them to be very agile. So that also ties in with my curiosity, because I love to learn things across different domains. So, it's not just psychology, there's a lot of stuff about your biology, and there's also, like historical context, understanding different cultures, and I love it.
Okay, all right. So moving on, let's talk a bit about challenges that you face at work due to ADHD.
For me, it was definitely sitting still. So in class, let's just sit back and tell you the history biographically in class. If the teacher was interesting, fantastic. If the teacher was mediocre and boring, my God, brain would just switch off. I'll be drawing. I had this major fashion portfolio that I created while doing my O-levels because the teachers were so boring. I studied up so much on fashion just because of that. So, when I was training and working at NHS in England, there was a lot of team stuff, team meetings, and same thing being talked over again. No agenda. I'm like, God, just stop joining on. So it's very difficult because I just thought, my gosh, I need to get engaged, I need to show face, but this is making it so hard to do that. So that was hard, and obviously, being an entrepreneur is different. And then when I'm talking to clients and when I'm speaking in groups, these are things that I really love. So my brain is completely switched on. So you just gotta find an environment and a happy, sweet spot. But of course, but during those training years, I knew those were like the necessary evils that I needed to go through and kind of learn to get through that. I just told myself, I'm not selling my soul, I'm renting my soul.
Just temporary, right?
Yes. And I'll make sure I'm renting it for sure. That there is a deadline, and then I'm gonna claim it back.
For me, it's taking through what I'm doing through the boring stuff of the data analytics. It's not always fun, especially when you have to build reports, which is boring. I really struggle, just to keep the pace up, and I just can't pick it up until it's last day of delivery, and then I was like, because I know in my mind I know that I can do it in like 2 hours. Why should I waste all the time, and that builds up, and then that creates anxiety, and it's like a sword hanging over your head kind of situation. Until that comes, I just can't function. But if it is like pretty interesting stuff, like just creating something for someone which is going to be used, so I find value in doing it. I find value in putting my time in. That I would work like from day one. But the boring stuff is something, administrative work. I just don't like to do it. So I just have to I don't know what to do with it. So I try to put like multiple reminders, and then I ignore the reminders.
So did you guys come up with hacks, or what are the strategies that you found helpful?
For me to make myself stick to timeline, I actually I had a weekly check-in with my boss. So I told him that I need your help here to put a deadline for me so that I can do it. So that actually helped me complete that certification within 2 weeks. Something that I was actually waiting for 2 years. So and then for my like day-to-day work, for my own career improvement, if I just want to upskill myself, so I ask my husband to just remind me of things that I need to do. So that also helps me to I just want him to sit with me, talk me through what are the things I can do, and then I just try to pick up things that are interesting, and then I tell him that you need to keep me on my toes for that. Otherwise, that's not going to happen. You have to work your whole life.
Yes. So kind of like setting up accountability
Yes,
structures
it's
around
very
you,
important.
right?
Yeah. For me, it's setting up accountability is really, really important. Otherwise, I can just sit on it for life.
For 2 years, right? How about you?
For me, I think like one of the really big things is streamlining. So there's a lot of things that are nice and shiny, and I know as an entrepreneur, as a psychologist or coach, whatever, people tell you got to do this, you got to have this system, you got to have lots of social media around your business and other stuff. And while it works for some people, it may not work for me, or maybe I just don't want to do it, and intuitively I don't want to do it as well. So it's about learning what to discard and not to beat yourself up about the task you don't want to finish, because you could start a project and sometimes it's due to a lack of perseverance, but sometimes you just realize it's something that you don't want. It's like you're trying out a lifestyle and then it's not you. You've given it enough chances, you've reflected enough, and you're discarding it. And it's okay to be able to discard. In fact, I just like throwing things out. Like, it's one of my favorite things ever. Like there needs to be space to breathe. So I think about it as like you go into a museum, you go into a gallery, it looks beautiful because there's white space. If it's a hoarder's hellhole, it's going to stink. So you have to think about your life in that way. And then another thing I found that really useful is the concept of body doubling. Have you heard of that?
No.
So in ADHD, body doubling is when you have somebody else in the room, maybe doing parallel things with you, a bit like parallel play in autism, but they may not be doing the exact same thing or whatever. It's just that you're bouncing off each other's energy to do your stuff. Sometimes I go to a cafe just because I just need the white noise there, and people are doing work there, so I'm also doing my work. keeps me accountable in that sense, because okay, I want my coffee and I can either waste this time or I can walk out of this place thinking, I spent this time really, really well.
So I used to find myself much more productive when I was in office pre-COVID, because I had people around me who were working. My boss used to sit just beside me, and my boss's boss used to just sit next to me, like in the room. So he would just pop out anytime, and then we'd be like, then I was like most of the time I was just into my laptop, into my system all the time. And that way I actually could get things done way faster and way a lot than post-COVID, because there is nobody around. Like, both of us are working in different rooms, and both of us are having different calls, and and that breaks that rhythm of you just going through, and then now you're completely relying on the things that you like. There is no pressure anymore.
Where there's a person or there's a time. Like, time is really important for me as well. So, sometimes I got articles to write and I'm just like, yeah, whatever, lazy, because my amygdala hasn't kicked in yet. So then my editor will be like, okay, evening New York Times Sunday. I'm like, so she might give it to me 9 days before. I'm like, okay, yeah, sure. And then Sunday, I'm like, uh-oh. It's already fermenting in my head. I kind of already written the structure, and then I tell myself, okay, I'm going to set alarms, 7-minute windows, 7 minutes, it rings. Then sometimes I stop, sometimes I snooze. And otherwise, what I will also do is I would tell myself, okay, right, if you don't do this, you can't go for dinner. You have to cancel your dinner.
That's what I do.
Yes,
That's what actually
self-threat. It's really important to have self-compassion and just understanding the way we're wired. But sometimes, we need a bit of that threat
yes.
to scare ourselves, because unless the threat center in your head kicks in, the ADHD brain just doesn't wake up.
Right, interesting. Okay, so maybe we'll shift gears a little bit to look at organizations.
Yeah.
What can organizations do to really help to bring out the best in employees with ADHD?
It would to be not stigmatized and have a supportive environment, something that is psychologically safe for people to say that, right, this is the way I'm wired, and this is not an excuse, but rather, some of us are better at this, some of us are better at that. So let's work together. Let's find a way to harness each other's gifts and skills, rather than, okay, this is how you're wired now, and bam, change, become somebody else. That will be really important to give them that understanding, because when you give that understanding, people are actually more motivated to work harder, work better, work faster, and they're more energized. Whereas if you do it from a stigmatizing kind of point of view, then people already start with low energy, lower self-esteem, and that can really create a compound interest on the cost to them and the company as well.
But there's still a lot of things that needs to be done, especially when it comes to ADHD, because people are embracing autism, other challenges, but ADHD is not at that par. And when it comes to being evaluated at the end of the financial year, organizations need to provide people with a safe house, saying that no matter what you do, no matter what you are, you're not evaluated against your peers. You're evaluated against what work you've done and what you've set out. The only thing is that people will not be very willing to come up that as a neurodivergent if they think that will bring them down. And that's the safe house that needs to be provided by an organization for them to maybe have a group of people, have them speak to the rest of the team, have a page for for different type of neurodiverse people, like for more information about ADHD, more information about dyslexia, because nobody ever spoke, nobody actually came up with that.
I think there are plenty of us who Trojan horse ourselves into normal society, and just because we manage to tolerate and also pay a very strong emotional and physical price to be able to mask, doesn't mean that it's not difficult for us. It's actually very difficult, and there's only a certain extent to which you can mask, because it's a burden that gets heavier and heavier with every day. And so, it's about, these people, just because you've chosen your horse yourself in doesn't mean how well you're doing and how more you can do if you're supported. So the conversation can shift towards we already know you do well. So it's not like we are completely creating a new set of situations, building building completely new structures, having to,
yes,
to
I
demolish
think,
from ground up. We already have such people here.
Yes.
Let's begin by supporting them. And
Right.
then, like with that, when we reach a tipping point, then the conversation can potentially change.
So within the team, when you know that you have a neurodivergent person, or especially the person with ADHD who needs to have something to feed on, like your brain needs to feed on something which is always interesting. So you put them into a work which requires out of the box thinking, which requires
yes.
them to be
that's a
on
good
their
point as
toes
well, yeah.
all the time. And
So
that's
thinking about the matching, right?
yeah,
of the
you have
strengths
yes,
to the
to the job. That would be that would actually bring much more out of them, and that would be beneficial for the organization itself, rather than just, for example, if I have ADHD, if you put me in admin work, forget about it.
Yeah.
That's never going to be done.
Yeah, where somebody else could love admin work,
Yes.
right? And they love being handheld the whole time.
Yeah.
They like a lot of information and structure. And if you told them to do something that's out of the box, they will die.
Yeah.
So
Right.
we don't penalize those people.
Yeah.
We don't go, why can't you do this and all that. So it's more like, okay, I'm good at this, I'm good at that. It's not like you're not going to learn admin. It's not like your life has completely fallen apart, right?
Yes.
You're still
Yeah,
alive
exactly.
today, you've got a
Yeah.
good job and all that stuff. So it's more about, hey, you know what, let's be effective about our use of resources.
Yes, exactly.
Because parents complain about that all the time, right? At work, he's like, I don't understand why my child sit on the desk must be like that. I'm like, they
Funny
show me
posture.
like that.
I wrote all 3 dissertations on my sofa and on the floor. And when someone said, girl, where is your desk? I'm like, oh, I need a desk.
even if I'm sitting on chair, I'll be like cross-legged.
Yeah.
And then my leg will go down. I'm like, shit, I can't walk.